The Navalny story is pretty wild. It includes him recording a video where he calls someone and he claims that the person he's speaking to was actually an FSB agent on the team that tried to kill him.
This Russian agent was tricked into revealing how they poisoned Navalny, right?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you come across a story, John, that really leaves your jaw wide open. And this is one of them. Essentially, what happened is that Alexei Navalny called this Russian FSB operative who was part of this elite toxins team that was trailing Navalny for years. They had expertise in chemical weapons. He called him and he pretended that he was a member of the National Security Council carrying out an investigation into how the poisoning operation had gone down. And quite frankly, shockingly, the operative who he spoke to, Konstantin Kudrytsev, who himself graduated from the Russian Academy of Chemical Defense, he actually spills the beans to Navalny. He falls for it.
If he had flown a little longer and perhaps would not have landed so quickly and all, perhaps it would have all gone differently. That is, had it not been for the prompt assistance of doctors or ambulances on the landing strip and so on.
The plane landed after 40 minutes. Basically, this should have been taken into account while planning the operation. It wasn't that the plane landed instantly. They calculated the wrong dose, the probability. Why?
Well, I can't say why. As I understand it, we added a bit extra. So...
I mean, just chilling words, John. We added a bit extra. Well, despite that added dose, Alexei Navalny is still alive. And boy, does this conversation punch a giant hole in the Kremlin's narrative.
Now, it's important to stress that while the video looks real and he's speaking to someone on a phone, we, of course, have no way to independently verify whether the person that Navalny is speaking to on the video really is who Navalny says he is, because it could be staged, or Navalny could be being played by someone who set up the video. And on that front, the video was made with Bellingcat, which is, as we've talked about a lot here at the Grayzone, Bellingcat is essentially a state outlet. It is funded by NATO member states, including the US and UK. And the bulk of its work is putting out articles that target official adversaries, especially Russia and Syria. So anything involving Bellingcat, I think, should be taken with a heavy dose of skepticism. That doesn't mean that this Navalny allegation is false. It could be true. If the FSB tried to poison him, it could be a very thuggish way to send a message to people who have been accused of collaborating with the West, as Navalny has. That, to me, would be the most plausible explanation if really the FSB was guilty of poisoning Navalny. But of course we don't know. All we can do is look at the facts in front of us. One more thing I'll just say about Bellingcat is that if you follow the Grayzone, you know that we recently exposed Bellingcat for taking part in a hoax, an attempt to discredit one of the OPCW whistleblowers. And we actually exposed how they published false information in a bid to impugn this whistleblower's credibility. And basically Bellingcat claimed that this whistleblower had received a letter that refutes all of his allegations. But as we showed, this whistleblower, Dr. Brendan Whelan at the of the OPCW, never got the letter that Bellingcat claims he got. And the letter that Bellingcat claims was sent contained a bunch of ludicrous claims that were easily disproven. And we'll link to that article below if you want to read it. The point is, there are ample reasons to be skeptical of anything involving Bellingcat. And what's funny is they're treated seriously in public and they're referred to as this independent investigative website.
Navalny is still recovering in Berlin. The probe was conducted by journalists at a number of outlets, including CNN and Der Spiegel, as well as the online investigative website Bellingcat.
When really, again, they are state funded, and when really in private, their own state funders have raised questions about their credibility. So let me quote to you a document. This is a leaked document from the Integrity Initiative, which is an intelligence operation run by the British government. And this was, in private, their assessment of Bellingcat. Quote, Bellingcat was somewhat discredited, both by spreading disinformation itself and by being willing to produce reports for anyone willing to pay, unquote. So that's the private assessment from the British government of its own outlet, Bellingcat. And the fact that Bellingcat is state funded by the same governments that view Russia as an adversary, and the fact that one of those governments, the UK, has such a low opinion of Bellingcat should be applied to our assessments of any story that involves Bellingcat's research and so-called journalism. One more thing to think about when we talk about the Navalny case. It emerged in recent reporting that, in fact, the CIA and the MI6 played a critical role in the accusations against Russia. This was recently reported by the New York Times. Quote, shortly after Mr. Navalny's arrival in Berlin, representatives from the CIA and Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, the MI6, provided members of the German government with details about the poisoning, including the identities of the Federal Security Service officers involved that directly implicated the Russian government. So that's a big revelation, because it shows that months after Navalny was poisoned, he was poisoned in late August. Now we're learning that immediately afterwards, the CIA and the MI6, who are major adversaries of Russia, were the ones who provided the supposed evidence that implicated Russia. And now, months later, a report that supposedly confirms those allegations is being produced by a website, Bellingcat, that is funded by the same states behind the CIA and the MI6. And Bellingcat, by the way, if you look through all of its work, it constantly parrots the claims and the goals of the CIA and the MI6, whether it's Russia or Syria or elsewhere. And by the way, it's not just me who says that Bellingcat carries out functions and duties for Western intelligence services. It's actually admitted pretty much right out in the open. So take, for example, this recent headline in Foreign Policy magazine. The article is called "Bellingcat Can Say What U.S. Intelligence Can't." And let me quote some of the officials that it cites. The former deputy chief of operations for Europe and Eurasia said, quote, "I don't want to be too dramatic, but we love this," referring to Bellingcat's latest investigation about Navalny. He goes on to say, "Whenever we had to talk to our liaison partners about it, instead of trying to have things cleared or worry about classification issues, you could just reference their work." So if you're an intelligence service, Bellingcat is this beautiful way to get around classification issues. Instead of declassifying stuff yourself, you farm out the task to a supposed independent investigative website, and they publish it for you. It works out great. Let me quote you someone else. Daniel Hoffman, the former CIA chief of station in Russia. "The Russians routinely deny and say, well, present us the facts. The greatest value of Bellingcat is that we can then go to the Russians and then say, there you go." Here's another former official, Daniel Fried, who is a diehard Cold Warrior who resigned from government in Donald Trump's early months and has been criticizing Trump for, in his view, being insufficiently hawkish on Russia, even though in reality, as we've covered extensively, Trump has been, in policy, a hawk on Russia. This is what Daniel Fried says. "The advantage of having Bellingcat doing it is that you don't have to have a sources and methods debate within your government." So it's pretty explicit right there what Bellingcat's role is. And given that, and given the central role of the CIA and the MI6 in the Navalny affair in terms of their so-called intelligence being used to confirm the allegations against Russia or to lodge the allegations against Russia, Bellingcat's role now, I think, is all the more reason to view it with skepticism.